Empire of Shadows, a story of hidden wealth. The autumn rain tapped gently against the tall windows of the Whitmore mansion, creating a rhythm that had become as familiar to Sarah as her own heartbeat. She stood in the grand library, surrounded by leather-bound books that reached from floor to ceiling, their spines gleaming in the soft lamplight. The air smelled of old paper and polished wood, carrying with it the weight of generations. Sarah had always known her family was different. The Whitmores lived in a house that seemed too large for any normal family, with rooms that went unused. For months at a time, her grandfather, Thomas Whitmore, moved through their world like a shadow, speaking in whispers with men in expensive suits who arrived at odd hours. But it wasn't until her 18th birthday that she began to understand just how different they truly were. The revelation came slowly, like dawn breaking over a mountain range. It started with a key her grandfather pressed into her palm one evening after dinner. The metal was warm from his touch, and etched with symbols she didn't recognize. "There are things you need to know, Sarah," he had said, his voice carrying the weariness of someone who had kept secrets for too long. "About our family, about what we really are." The key opened a door in the basement that Sarah had never noticed before, hidden behind a bookshelf that swung open with surprising silence. Beyond the door lay a corridor that seemed to stretch into darkness, lit only by small lights that flickered on as they walked. The walls were lined with paintings of people she didn't recognize, their eyes following her movement with an intensity that made her skin prickle. At the end of the corridor was a room that took Sarah's breath away. It was filled with documents, photographs, and artifacts that spoke of a history she had never imagined. Maps covered one wall, marked with red pins in locations across the globe. Filing cabinets lined another wall, their drawers labeled with dates going back over to centuries. "We are the wealthiest family in the world," Thomas said quietly, watching as Sarah tried to process what she was seeing. "But our wealth comes with a price. We exist in the shadows, Sarah. We move behind the scenes, influencing events, shaping the world in ways that most people never realize." Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up a photograph from the desk. It showed her great-great-grandfather standing beside men who looked familiar from history books. Presidents, kings, business leaders whose names were known around the world. But in the photograph they all seemed to be listening to the quiet man in the center, her ancestor. "How is this possible?" she whispered. Thomas settled into a leather chair that had clearly been his for many years. The cushions were worn to the shape of his body, and a small table beside it held a glass of whiskey that never seemed to empty. "It began with your great-great-great-grandfather, Marcus Whitmore." He explained he understood something that others didn't. True power doesn't come from being seen or recognized. It comes from being needed, from being the person others turn to when they can't solve their problems themselves. Sarah learned that Marcus had started small, lending money to farmers during difficult seasons, helping small businesses weather unexpected storms. But he was clever about it. He never simply gave money away. Instead, he created relationships, bonds that lasted generations. When those farmers became successful, they remembered who had helped them. When those small businesses grew into corporations, they remained loyal to the family that had made their success possible. Over the decades, the Whitmore influence spread like roots through soil. They funded inventors whose creations changed the world. They supported politicians whose decisions shaped nations. They invested in companies before anyone else recognized their potential. But they did it all quietly, always remaining in the background, never seeking credit or recognition. "We became the family that other families turned to," Thomas continued. "When wars needed to be prevented, when economic disasters needed to be avoided, when the world needed guidance, they came to us. And with each favor, each solution we provided, our influence grew." Sarah spent hours in that hidden room, reading documents that revealed the true scope of her family's reach. The Whitmores had prevented conflicts that could have devastated entire continents. They had guided technological developments that improved millions of lives. They had quietly supported social movements that brought justice to those who had been forgotten. But as she read, Sarah began to feel a growing weight in her chest. The responsibility that came with this knowledge felt overwhelming. Every decision her family made affected countless lives. Every choice rippled outward in ways that most people would never understand. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted to her grandfather one evening as they sat in the hidden room. "It's too much. How do you carry this burden?" Thomas smiled, and for the first time since she had learned the truth, his expression was genuinely warm. The same way Marcus did, and his son after him, and every generation since. "You remember that wealth without purpose is meaningless. Power without compassion is dangerous. We don't use our influence for our own benefit, Sarah. We use it to make the world a little better, a little safer, a little more just." He showed her letters from families they had helped, photographs of schools they had funded, reports on medical research they had supported. Each document told a story of lives improved, of problems solved, of hope restored. The Whitmores had used their shadow empire not to control the world, but to heal it. "But why stay hidden?" Sarah asked. "Why not Let people know about the good we do, because the moment we step into the light, we lose our ability to help, Thomas explained. People begin to expect things from us. They start to resent our influence, even when we use it to help them. They create rules and regulations that limit what we can do. In the shadows, we can act quickly, decisively, without the complications that come with public attention. Over the following months, Sarah began to understand her role in the family legacy. She learned to read the subtle signs that indicated where help was needed. She studied the complex networks of relationships that her family had built over generations. She began to see the world not as separate countries and competing interests, but as a single interconnected system that needed careful tending. The work was difficult, requiring patience and wisdom beyond her years. But gradually Sarah began to feel something she hadn't expected. Instead of being crushed by the responsibility, she found herself energized by it. There was something deeply satisfying about solving problems that others couldn't, about preventing disasters before they occurred, about quietly making the world a better place. On her 19th birthday, Sarah stood once again in the hidden room beneath their house, but this time, she wasn't overwhelmed by what she saw. Instead, she felt a sense of purpose that filled her with quiet confidence. The empire of shadows that her family had built wasn't about wealth or power. It was about service, about using their unique position to care for a world that didn't even know it needed caring for. As she looked at the maps on the wall, with their red pins marking places where the Whitmores had quietly changed history, Sarah smiled. She understood now that being the richest family in the world wasn't about the money. It was about having the resources, the connections, and the wisdom to make a difference when it mattered most. The rain continued to tap against the windows above, but down in the hidden room, Sarah Whitmore began planning how she would carry her family's shadow empire into the future, guided by the same quiet purpose that had driven them for generations.